Wow, I can't believe America has been around for 2023 years. Gaming in the current year is my annual wrap-up to go over all the games I played within the calendar year. That may sound like a lot, but there are some exceptions. If I have already made a video about it, it won't go here because, duh. Games are not specifically going to be games released in the current year because who the hell has time to play new releases? And I'm going to omit any fighting games, maybe unless it's a new release I really want to talk about. So one of the games I played this year has to be the GOTY 2023. Let's frickin' get into it, dog. I did it! I finally did it. No more tumbling my way through the slums of Jantai Battle cosplayer, I learned how to play Mahjong. And it is 100% due to finally sitting down and playing Mahjong Soul. Mahjong Soul is a free-to-play online Mahjong game for mobile and browser. It has characters and in-game currencies and all manner of shit I've never once interacted with because my ass is here to fucking play Mahjong. I've been kind of publicly voicing my frustration with the game, not only on here thanks to the Age of Discovery with the Sega Saturn video, but elsewhere and among friends. I was clued into Mahjong Soul as a good tutorial for the game, and I think they are half right in saying that. Personally, I found Mahjong Soul is far and away the easiest way to learn Mahjong in practice, but the game does no stellar job in actually teaching you it. It's not like it has an in-depth tutorial benefiting the in-depth mechanics of the game. So before we can really talk about Mahjong Soul anymore, let's do a crash course with Professor, Substitute Teacher, Untrained Temp Worker Idolism J on Mahjong 101. Mahjong is a 4-player game where you race against the other 3 players to be the first to make a winning hand across multiple rounds of play. Much like, say, poker, there are many different winning hand conditions such as how poker has straight, full house, or flush. These are called yaku, and they are the conditions you need to fill to have the 14 tiles in your hand equal victory. The most basic of these is called Riichi, but before we know what constitutes winning, we should know what we are even playing with to get there. Mahjong has 3 suits: dots, bamboo, and characters. There's various exact terminology, but you can be informal for ease of use. These range from 1 to 9 in each suit. Where Mahjong starts to get a little non-52 card-y are the honors. There are 4 winds, 1 for each cardinal direction, and then 3 dragons, a red, a green, and a white. In a deck, there are 4 of each tile, so 4 red dragons, 4 north winds, 4 7 bamboo, etc. Looping back to Riichi. A Riichi is a hand consisting of 4 pairings of 3, either sequences of ascending or descending suits, or a triplet of the same tile, and 1 pair of 2. However, when you are 1 tile away from getting a Riichi in hand, you must declare it to the board and wager 1,000 of your points. From that point, you are locked into hunting for the last piece to make your winning hand. Sounds complicated, right? I regret to inform you that this is the easy part. See, the thing with Riichi is that outside of declaring that you are going for it, it's quite free of restrictions. Get 4 sets of 3 and 1 set of 2. That's all it takes. Almost all other winning conditions, or yaku, are some more difficult variation on these 4 sets of 3 and 1 set of 2. There are oodles of yaku that honestly have insane conditions to them, like Shosangun, which is a hand containing 2 sets of 3 dragons and 1 set of 2 dragons. If I was playing a game and someone hit me with this, I would probably uninstall and or leave the room and or go outside and get fresh air.
いやバケモンおるんやけどトンシャーペイ全部暗冠してるし何見えてないしあれやばいでしかも親やからとんでもない点数なんぞあーちょ待ってそれ6倍役満
スイーソー数貫通数ニャンコ短期大数詞6倍役に
However, the other most widely applicable yaku are Tanyayo, Jesus Christ. Tanyayo, or all simples, a hand with no 1s, 9s, winds, or dragons. Yakuhai, a hand where you have a triplet of your seat wind, round wind, or dragons. And Pinfu, a hand of all sequences, and the final pair is not your seat wind, round wind, or dragons, plus the winning tile has to be the finishing part of one of your sequences. I'd also maybe give a shout out to Toi Toi, a hand of all sets as opposed to Pinful's all sequences, and Chitoitsu, an exception to standard hand structure because it's all just pairs of 2. I mentioned seat wind and round wind. Those are in reference to what round and seat location you are sitting. Whatever seat you are in relation to your dealer is your seat wind. So if I'm across from the dealer, who always sits east, I am seated west, and the west wind tiles are online for me to win with. After every hand played, the win position will move one over, making it so the next person will be east, thusly be the dealer, and thusly changing your personal seat wind. Mahjong is set up into rounds, specifically an east round and a south round. During each east or south round, those wins become online for everyone, regardless of seating position. So if you are in east round and at the east seat, you can only use east wind to fulfill those yaku, which sounds like a handicap, but you get a nice point bonus for it. A round ends when east position makes its way all the way across the board and back to the person it started with. However, if you win a hand while in east position, the wins will not move until someone else wins, making the game go longer for more hands. So is this just 4 people playing solitaire in front of each other hoping to win first? God no. When a player discards a tile, other players may steal it to finish a sequence, chi, finish a triplet, pon, or use it as the last piece to finish their hand and win, ron. However, the act of stealing dramatically changes how you play the game. Everyone starts off with what is called a closed hand, and when you steal a tile, you move to an open hand. The kicker is that some yaku can only be done in a closed hand, so if you are building toward Riichi, Pinfu, or Chitoitsu, you cannot steal any tiles off the board, whereas with Tanyayo, oh my fucking god. All simples, Yaku Hai, and Toi Toi, fucking steal to your heart's content, baby. You still win in this round. Finally, each type of winning hand has a different point total associated with it, but fuck off with explaining that because there's not enough smart weed in the world for me to deal with it. Just know that the more complicated shit gets you more points, and if you win a hand by stealing a tile, you win points from that player's point pool, as opposed to if you win a hand by drawing a tile, you win points by taking from all players' pools. Okay, now that you are screaming and crying and yelling for the information monster to stop attacking you with information, we can get back to how Mahjong Soul actually works, because it makes this so much easier to digest in play. If you are looking at one of your tiles, it will highlight just how many of the same tile have been discarded. If you call Riichi, the game goes into autopilot, automatically discarding anything you draw that isn't the winning tile. If you are deciding between 2 tiles which to discard and you are only 1 tile away, the game will tell you how many potentially live tiles are still out there, which combinations will not have a yaku associated with it, and if they leave to Furitin, which is another mechanic that's like a lose condition, let's call it. I didn't explain it because holy fuck, come on, do you see this game? When an opponent discards a tile, you get a huge, bright pop-up on if you want to steal it. All of this may seem minor, but it does so much of the legwork in keeping your mental stat clean and able to focus on actually making decisions instead of constantly trying to keep abreast of the board state. Because you know what? I've gotten to now play Mahjong in real life, and holy fucking lord above, it is hard to keep your mental stat clean and able to focus on actually making decisions instead of constantly trying to keep abreast of the board state. IRL Mahjong is really cool, and there's not only a physicality to the game that is enjoyable, but Mahjong Soul lacks some of the more physical exclusive aspects of the game, like angling your wall to the person on your right as a sign of courtesy and manners. All of this had me at the table fucking sweating. There were so many things going on, and I was playing with good players, so I was working overtime to keep up while not misplaying. Mahjong Soul may not have the hyper-detailed tutorial needed to get you on your feet with the game, but it does such a good job streamlining the experience of playing it. If you have any interest in learning Mahjong, well, good fucking luck, but I would highly recommend playing Mahjong Soul. It's free, easily available via mobile or browser, and does the best job possible in getting you understanding the flow of the game once you have your sea legs. It's been a long time since I've learned something so alien and complex like this, and I have a lot of thanks to give to Mahjong Soul for making the journey that much easier. Fuck the cat girl though. take one look at the screenshots of Majin and Sacrificial Girl, and your mind begins to imagine what could possibly be going on. Almost clay-like surreal creatures bathed in a color scheme of soft yellows, desaturated blues, and purples, all washed with this noisy grain of dithering. How could you not be excited? First impressions are so important, and if you were scrolling around the internet and managed to stumble upon this, you would immediately want to know more. Majin and Sacrificial Girl is a small indie deck builder game set in 15 floors of a maze. And maybe that's the problem. Majin and Sacrificial Girl cannot live up to the first impression it sets. It's a very simple game, almost too simple. You can beat it pretty easily in one sitting and without much difficulty. As a deck builder, it's perfectly fine. Each floor grants you a new card to add to your deck, almost all of which have useful abilities easy enough to decipher that I only had one card that I didn't know what it did. Cards allow more moves per turn, buff attacks, shield you for a turn, and there's a variety of attacks with interesting drawbacks or restrictions. I was never able to put together what it means when a card is blue, but one of the more interesting wrinkles is when a card is yellow. Yellow cards will forcibly end your turn, making it so that you have to adapt your lines to make sure this card is either used last or possibly not used at all in favor of something else. Getting good lines feels rewarding, and being able to cut cards you don't want clogging your deck allows you to speed through your power plays with more consistency. And that's kind of the bulk of Majin and Sacrificial Girl. Enemies are rarely varied in any manner other than how they look. When you lose a battle, you get to instantly return with no consequence, so it often feels like you lose not because there is a tough enemy in front of you, but because you got unlucky and your deck bricked. The dungeon maze is almost entirely a big pile of nothing. Every floor has the same type of items of interest strewn throughout it. An item chest that gives you a new card, a mushroom fellow who you can pay to increase your health, a crystal that gives you a new line of story. Yeah, that's it. Rinse, wash, and repeat. And it's kind of a bummer. What gets your foot through the door is this distinctive and eye-catching art style, but there has to be a game there that keeps you playing. The charm can't hold on for a couple hours, it just becomes normal. Honestly, after the first floor of zooming through nothing burger stone walls, you start to forget about the great look of the game as it all just becomes normal. Obviously, this is a small game, so it's not like it really outstays its welcome, but it left me with a sense of longing. It's not the game's fault that my mind cooked up higher expectations than it could handle, it's just a sad fact of life. I was hoping to come on here and gush about this surreal and creepy beautiful game I found, and instead I am here typing about a decent enough deck builder with a cool dithering and color overlay. Some of this footage is a little goofy. When the game opened for me, it did so in windowed mode and without a sort of options menu to adjust the resolution. I figured this was supposed to be this way, but after realizing I couldn't back out of my menus, I did a little hunting to see if anyone else was having the same problem I was. Long story short, if you're going to play this, do so after hitting Alt-Enter to get the game into full screen and properly scaled. But while I was looking around, I saw a Backloggd review from someone named Pasicon Deacon, where they said the following. Honestly, you could just admire the title screen and leave satisfied. That's exactly how I feel about Majin and Sacrificial Girl. You're not here to play an okay deck builder. You're definitely not here to play an almost non-existent first-person dungeon crawler. You're here because the grit and grain of this bruised color palette and the monsters that bask in it. And oddly enough, there are points in this game where this vibe unintentionally shows through. This isn't a real criticism. Once again, this is a super small indie game, but Majin and Sacrificial Girl has long, chunky loading times. Specifically, when you lose a battle, the screen will freeze for a good amount of time as you get back to the dungeon. I don't know how else to say it. These monsters look so much better as still images. In movement, they are too flowing, almost too rubbery in the way that betrays the possible creepiness of their design. But frozen in place, they feel more alive than ever. I really don't want to dog this game. I know I'm coming in kind of hot, but its shortcomings, while excusable by being a quick indie game, make it seem more like a tech demo than an actual game. If you got a couple spare hours, it won't hurt to play it, but if you think there's something more behind its opening title, be warned that there might not be. Oh, and all the music is the most generic throwaway tunes I've heard. All this footage has the audio turned almost all the way down. Instead, you can hear MBT's Yu-Gi-Oh videos as I play.
Get creative. I expect blood. I expect carnage. But more than anything else, I expect to be proven right once again.
Important update. Monolith was renamed to Star of Providence sometime after video production. This script talks about the game when I played it, and updates have been made to the game since. I'm not going to say I bounced off of Binding of Isaac, but it didn't hold me to the degree that I think it did for a lot of people. Nothing's really wrong with that, it's just not sparking with me to keep me playing. Monolith, on the other hand, oh fuck yeah, son, this is it. Working well within the foundation Isaac set, Monolith is a twin-stick dungeon-crawling rogue-like with a very well-done NES aesthetic, and it fucking rules. The structure is very digestible. You shoot through a Legend of Zelda map to fight some bosses and descend further. The boss room will only unlock once you defeat the mini-boss or mini-bosses elsewhere on this map.
The Nimbus has been broken? Oh my god! Nimbus, are you okay? Nimbus, oh my god. Nimbus! Nimbus, are you okay? Nimbus, are you okay? Nimbus, are you okay? Nimbus, are you okay? Nimbus! Please tell me you're okay! Yeah, he's fucking fine.
There is a variety of Isaac-like rooms to find, such as shops, skills to gamble for, items you can buy by sacrificing max health, and shrines that ask for big sacrifices to give big rewards. Where Monolith gets unique is the addition of weapons and upgrades. Each floor has an upgrade chamber and a weapon chamber. Upgrade chambers give you a choice of 3 perks for your run. Some really effective, like better drops or store discounts, and some I've literally never felt the reason to use, like electricity not damaging you. These are good, but there definitely feels like some slam dunk choices you would want in every run as early as possible. The weapon chamber is really where this game sets itself apart from other contemporaries. You will get a choice of weapons with random buffs on them, but the ammo is limited. This drastically changes how the game is played. Like, big time, this is where a lot of the decision making happens. If you have a weapon and you pick up a new one, the old one will be scrapped for money and health. So sometimes you might want to change weapons sooner than planned to give yourself more life. You also have to plan around your ammo supply. If you run out of ammo, you will revert back to your default weapon, and having this switch over in the middle of a boss fight fucking blows. So because of this, there is a lot of planning and thinking about how you are going to approach weapons. Maybe you have a good weapon, but could use extra life points more. Maybe you have a weapon you want to keep, but are risking it on finding more ammo and capacity upgrades. Maybe you find the weapon chamber early and plan the rest of the map around using it later. For a game that has a lot of fast-paced bullet pattern dodging and monster shooting, this aspect of Monolith makes you really sit and think for a second. A possibly unfortunate byproduct of this weapon design is that you don't really feel like you are constantly evolving as the dungeon progresses. You are instead surviving. The only thing that stacks are the perks. You can't, add additional buffs to weapons as you go. You can only change them out. You do get universal buffs to damage and max ammo capacity, but the actual weapons themselves do not change. Contrast this to Isaac, which is constantly tacking on effects to your offense the longer you go in. In Monolith, it feels more about the constant survival, planning out your weapon swap to the best of your ability to keep ammo and health high while never being stuck with just your default pea shooter. This makes getting the run really fucking difficult because rarely are you going to get an above average weapon from the weapon chamber. You can blow a perk on highly upgraded weapon selections or find them in stores or locked vaults, but it's really easy to make your way through an attempt and only get middling access to game changer weaponry. And that in and of itself isn't bad. Instead of progressing over time and feeling like you are overcoming a threat by becoming the threat yourself, you instead feel like you are constantly trying to survive as the levels get harder and harder. That might make some things almost unrealistically difficult when you get to the Overlord, but that's not rogue to this genre. It still suits the game and not really something I would put down as a complaint. Maybe just more of a friction you should be aware of. But thankfully, runs in Monolith are usually breezy easy. They don't take too long, and it succeeds in making you want to immediately start another one after you bust her out. And what helps this is that the first level song is fucking great. The soundtrack and NES graphics are stellar across the board, but the first song of the run does a lot of lifting for me when it comes to that repeat playing. Not only is it a really catchy melody, but it's very cheery and welcoming. It gives off this vibe that starting over again is okay, and maybe this time things will go better for you. Monolith rules! The frantic, yet digestible bullet dodging gameplay has me invested in run after run, especially when you are on a plane where the rough and tumble turbulence feels naturally part of playing such a hectic game. So, Monolith wins the Airplane Award for the game that best helped quell my flight anxiety while in the air. Minor story spoilers for this one, with major story spoilers and discussions of sexual content ahead. You'll get a heads up when it's time to skip forward if you wish. Oh hell yeah, Tsukihime! I love Arcade! I play Arc in Melty Blood. I also play Arc in Melty Blood! It now has a free browser release that makes the game easily playable on both computer and mobile, and it comes with some very nice features. Modern functionality like skipping pre-read chapters, the choice of 3 soundtracks, with the ability to turn on warnings before H-scenes. This is a beautiful release, and I, having played it on my phone, am really impressed with how well this package was put together on mobile. A couple years ago, I played Clannad, one of what I would consider the early big 3 VNs in North America, so I'm about to make my mark on number 2. Sure, Clannad was fucking dire, but Tsukihime I have a moderate expectation for. I love Melty Blood, and I can't wait to see the fuller picture behind characters I've been around for years now. Not only that, but I've had people tell me that the series author Nasu is a great writer, so I jumped into Tsukihime with legitimate excitement. And it's fucking awful! Now, we're gonna get this out of the way up front. I only played Arcwid's routes. Arc and CL are the 2 major routes, and there are 3 minor routes for Akiha, Hisui, and Kohaku. This was one of the last things I played this year, so I didn't have the time to play everything, but doing one of the major routes with the cover girl of the game gave me enough confidence to say that Tsukihime is one of the most dog shit piles of garbage I've ever played/read. Let's get the good out of the way first. Nothing. Okay, let's take this shit to the cleaners. Okay, let me back up. I actually do like the art a lot. Sure, some of the characters have very strangely structured arms, but for the most part, the character art is very charming and offers a perfect range of emotions that fit the quirks of the cast. When Arc looks confused and exasperated, I believe it, because I'm also confused and exasperated. There's no way around it. The writing is crap. Now, I am saying that with the translation in mind. I've heard that this isn't the greatest translation, and I gave the game a long leash in that regard. Like, there were some times that I could sense a line was structured like a Japanese line and just directly brought over without a whole lot of cleanup behind it. That's fine. That doesn't bother me, nor am I gonna mark a game for it. What chaps my fucking hide are like the big swings, the story, the characters, the prose, or more importantly, the lack thereof. I found Tsukihime to be a boring, frustrating, and very unenjoyable read. The narratorial lens of Tonoshiki as your main character fucking blows. He's not a character that's fun to be stuck in the head of, and there's multiple reasons for this. The first of which is most important. Shiki is a disgusting scumbag shit-stained motherfucker. This dude sucks. It sucks to be him, and it sucks to be around him. He's rude, callous, negging, stupid, doesn't pay attention, doesn't treat other people with any worthwhile manner, doesn't listen, and in general, his greatest contribution is being able to produce carbon dioxide. That, in and of itself, isn't bad. What's bad is how it happens without comment nor reflection. Shiki's unbelievable dunderheadedness is presented as acceptable, not some character flaw that he should learn to grow through. It's not like Shiki is some dredge who's going on a journey to learn how to mind his fucking manners for once. No, see, that would be an interesting character arc in a good story, which this is not. No one really calls attention to the fact that Shiki is a dickhead. He just is one, and everyone around him kind of goes, that's our Shiki, a normal, well-adjusted person. You want someone to go upside this dude's head and tell him to stop being such a fucking pecker, but no part of the story ever looks at Shiki's personality and says, this is bad, please fix yourself. The other part of it sucking to be Shiki is that he couldn't describe his way out of a paper bag. Shiki only ever describes what is going on in front of him in plain detail. Sure, we get some musings on his past and ruminations on the events of the story, but Shiki is physically unable to set the scene around him. I understand that this is a visual novel, and so there is a visual aspect at play that helps alleviate the writing of constantly dressing the sets. But so much of Shiki's observations are checklists for what he's doing in that moment. There is an emptiness to the prose that permeates the whole game. For example, there's a day Arc visits Shiki at school and they talk, and eventually he tells her she needs to go home and rest because she's still injured. And he's right, because she assumedly still is, but like, can I get a temperature check on it? Can you notice she's walking stiff? Can you notice she's favoring one side? Can you notice that during conversation, her arm stays tucked to where her abdomen was injured? This sounds banal, but I need this clarification because I can't tell if Shiki actually believes Arc is injured and wants her to rest, or if he's just saying so because Arc is annoying him and he wants her out of his hair. Like, given the personalities at play, either way to read it could be viable. It was getting to the point where I thought this might be intentional. For those unaware, the basic premise of Tsukihime is that Shiki survives a near-death accident in his youth, and it awakens the ability to see the death of everything around him in the form of black lines. Tracing these lines that only he can see causes that object to die. This power, known as Mystic Eyes of Death Perception, can't even lie, that's hard as fuck, I love it, would drive Shiki mad if he didn't have special glasses given to him by Jumpsy Laser Sword F.A.Yoko. Obviously, Shiki has a problem with his perception, trying not to see what he sees for his own sanity. There was so little descriptive narration coming from Shiki that I thought, maybe he has dulled his perception overall. Maybe the madness of being able to perceive death of all objects around him, being able to effortlessly interact with that death as well, has stunted Shiki's ability to perceive in general. I genuinely thought this was a plot point, that Shiki has numbed himself so far in fear of what laid on the other side of those glasses. I am begging Shiki to describe the world around him. When he goes to the park at night to meet Arc, I am screaming at him to wax just a little bit upon what it must be like. This park, emptied by the collective fear of the vampire murders, must have something worth talking about. Describe the stillness of a place normally seen active being reduced to a location so empty you would wonder if anyone would ever come back. Describe the terror that travels through the community and how the weight of it can be felt in all this nothingness. Describe the crispness of an air that only you are breathing. Describe fucking something! Give me a reason to feel like I am in the world around you. When Shiki is forced to converse with people, it doesn't fare much better. Early on when Shiki is talking to his classmates, it's not bad. But once Arc shows up and the story gets mystical, there becomes a large amount of conversations that are just one-sided exposition dumps. Again, that's not bad in and of itself. The story has a lot of hay it needs to bale about the world of vampires, so exposition to a numbskull is to be expected. Final Fantasy X came out a year after Tsukihime, and it was all about that wave too. The problem is that they feel like they should be conversations, but Shiki sucks ass and usually comes off as more interested in seeing how many rocks he can stuff into his mouth while someone's talking to him. He doesn't come off as inquisitive or interested in this new world of vampirism he is thrust into. It's instead feeling like exposition because we gotta get this information to the person on the other side of the screen at some point. And there's a lot of that feeling across the plot. Multiple things just sorta happen to kickstart plot points, and they feel awkwardly forced. Without spoiling the plot, there is a section where the story needs Shiki to be at his school at night, and so the solution is to have a teacher, rightfully because he's been missing school days, ask Shiki to stay late. Shiki then goes to the room and waits for the teacher for an hour because the teacher never shows up. That's it! Now Shiki's at school at night, and when you're done reading that, it comes off as such a thinly veiled way of writing Shiki to be there because the story needed him to be there. It sticks out like a sore thumb, it's so obvious. Okay, I'm about to get into major story spoilers, which also means discussing some really heinous sexual assault. For both spoiler reasons and content warning reasons, please skip to this time to avoid all of that. So, if you can believe it, I've actually had my kid gloves on when I was saying that Shiki's a piece of shit. This dude is easily the worst main character I've ever played as because he's capable of just being the most vile motherfucker. And I do think the story has a point to make with that, but it's a point that it misses by a country mile. Shiki and Arkwade have this dichotomy going on where they see each other as a monster. Shiki looks at Ark and sees an 800-year-old vampire with mystical powers, and to him, that's an inhuman monster. Ark looks at Shiki and sees a human with mystical powers to see all the death in the world who flew into a bloodlust and literally chopped her into multiple pieces, and to her, that's an inhuman monster. The interplay is that Ark is a monster who is slowly becoming more human, and Shiki is a human slowly becoming a monster. The problem is that Shiki is a much worse monster than the theming kinda intended. I can't impress enough how embarrassing it is to read Shiki and Ark's interactions because Shiki treats Ark like dirt. He is constantly annoyed with her, calls her an idiot every chance he gets, and is overall just really disrespectful for no good reason. Like, there's a scene where they go to a burger joint and Shiki chides Ark for how she eats, telling her it's unbecoming to see her eat like that and she should just have some of his fries instead. And Ark's like, what the fuck, man? I'm just trying to eat a burgie, let me live. This isn't subtle. It gets to the point where, and this is a direct quote, Ark says, I don't ignore you. If I answer and you scold me, you just call me an idiot, so I stay quiet. These two are supposed to fall in love, yet Ark is out here in the fucking text sounding like an abused housewife in a broken, loveless marriage. Here's more direct text of Shiki being a fucking dickhead to Ark. Please, Arkwade, get straight now. It's true that you're selfish, that you don't listen to other people, and that you're full of problems. But other than that, you're pretty normal. You're not broken. You're just like a normal girl. So smile. If you keep making that expression, it'll make me feel bad. And again, the text acknowledges that Shiki's a dickhead because Ark's response is, that's pretty mean. Am I really that selfish? Ah, my God, Shiki, you couldn't be more of a worse person if you tried. And you fucking tried. Last chance to skip ahead because we're about to talk about some really bad sexual assault stuff. All the H scenes in Ark's route have dubious levels of consent to them, the first of which is the funniest and maybe the best plot beat in the entire story. I understand that's a really weird sell off the back of that first statement. One night, after helping Ark defeat a vampire, Shiki is in his bedroom when Ark flies in through the window, uses mystical powers to bind Shiki, and, as vampires are ought to do, sucks out his life essence through his penis. The next day, Shiki finds Ark and asks, hey Ark, what the fuck was that all about? And Ark explains that she sent him a succubus familiar as a way of saying thanks, telling Shiki that the familiar takes the form of the one he desires the most. Because they are kind of talking past each other about the same thing, Shiki reveals that the familiar showed up looking like Ark, and bam! Our leads now have a spark between them. Sure, this falls flat because Shiki keeps treating her like she unironically belongs in the kitchen, unironically making him a sandwich, but as a plot point, this is the best part of Ark's route. It has a very interesting setup that leads to a rewarding payoff for the plot, and how the romance of our characters gets brought up. The other H scenes? Please be aware I'm only talking about these because of how much narrative weight they hold. I don't like this. The second H scene comes off the back of Shiki trying to help Ark and discovering her in a back alley, wildly fighting off corrupted minions of an evil vampire. While Ark is able to dispatch them, something about this triggers a similar bloodlust in Shiki. But unlike the first time where this madness caused Shiki to chop Ark to pieces, this time it's a lot less blood and a lot more lust. While Shiki's eventually able to snap back before things go too far, the most deflating part of this is that Ark is the one who apologizes. She says that while she was fighting, she was using her own mystic eyes, and Shiki must have become captive to their thrall, causing him to assault her. This totally fucking sucks. And not just because it's the woman apologizing after being sexually assaulted, like goddamn fucking come on now, but it completely undercuts the theme. It would be a vastly more interesting story if Shiki was indeed susceptible to this crazed bloodlust that turned him into an uncontrollable, maiming and molesting force. There would be more to reckon with in regards to him being the monster that Arc says he is, because he would be. It would fit the theming so perfectly if the person Shiki sees as the monster is more human than him, because even if he thinks of himself as a human, he's the monster out of the two of them. But no, it's actually just Arc's fault because she had the mystic eyes of turn you into a rapist on while fighting. Oops, damn, I guess there's a reason we have the safety lock on those things. The final scene is the most appalling, but sadly the most important. After a bevy of adventures together, Shiki and Arc admit their feelings for each other, followed by Arc inviting Shiki back to her apartment. The vibes are kind of off immediately because Shiki, I love this so much, describes Arc undressing, and I quote, as naturally as if she was taking off her hat. This is like the line for me. I would frame this shit. Like, that's it? That's all we're gonna say about seeing your female lead undress. As naturally as taking off the hat she's so known for wearing. The iconic hat that cosplayers have fashioned their own versions of for decades now. That's it! We're not gonna add any more sizzle to the steak on this one. Not gonna expand the scene a little before our romantic leads share their first meeting of passion. Oh my god, this fucking writing. This is what I play this shit for. I could easily chalk this up to being a stinky translation, but there's nothing else said about this, so I can only assume that the original text mentioned her undressing with just as little detail. And then it becomes painfully obvious. Hey, if Shiki is constantly rude and uncaring to Arc, why would that stop during sex? Of course there's no dreamy allure to the prelude of their night together, because Shiki makes it a stomach-churning nightmare. I must clearly declare this. I don't find this scene reprehensible because consent is again dubious. Erotic fiction is a safe place for people to explore fetishes, and I'm no puritanical pearl clutcher. Just because I may or may not like something doesn't mean it shouldn't exist. No, what I find reprehensible is that the story has, maybe unknowingly, been building to this all along. This isn't some one-off scene in an H-dojin. This is the climax of Shiki's character. He spent all this time being so disrespectful to Arc, and now she is here with him in her most vulnerable states, and he treats her like an object. There's no room for mistranslation. The text says she is reduced to tears, and the artwork confirms it. And the story treats this as cool and good. The night ends, the story continues, and much like every other time Shiki has been an offensively misogynistic asshole, there's no reflection on it. The story never frames his actions as bad, never asks Shiki to look inward. Its silence tells you everything you need to know. It sees Shiki's actions as normal. It would be one thing if these were throwaway scenes to check the necessary eroge boxes, but they fit his established character too well. I always thought people said to skip the H scenes in Tsukihime because they were poorly written erotic fiction. And they are, don't get it twisted. But maybe the reason is because you shouldn't hate the main character this much. Fuck this guy. Roa is supposed to be the villain of Tsukihime, but I have nowhere near as many reasons to hate him as I do this fucker right here. In my Clannad review, I said that it broke me, playing off the idea that it emotionally broke people, but for me, it broke my preconceived notions of the genre. I was around during the cultural rise of those big 3 yens in North America, and for how popular they were among the weeaboo masses stateside, they were titanic in Japan. Tsukihime is a cultural juggernaut. It launched Type Moot into the stratosphere, and there's a reason that over 20 years later, I'm playing a new fighting game with these characters in it. This resonated with people, and after finishing Arcwed's route, the only thing I could think is, why? Why would someone read this, the route with the main heroine, and start clicking their heels as they dive into the rest of the game? There's no way our standards were this low. This shit came out in 2000. I thought I was reading the first work of some edgy teenager, but Natsu was fucking 27 years old when this shit came out. Everyone who told me this guy was a good writer needs to march to my house and apologize in person. Even if you take the rampant misogyny out of this route, which is like taking everything out of your soup but the parsley and crackers, it's still a poorly written story that has a small handful of cool ideas that mostly squanders anything it has going for it. And do you know how I know that? Because a couple years ago, I read the Tsukihime manga adaptation. This manga fucking rips. I loved this. Back in my first Gaming in the Current Year video, I almost talked about it during the intermission alongside Molester Man because both of those were the manga I read to cleanse my palate after Clannad. This adaptation, assumedly unlike the anime adaptation, which apparently is so bad everyone just agrees to memory hole it, completely fixes Tsukihime by fixing the weight-bearing issue. Shiki. Shiki is no longer a torrent of shitbag behavior. He's someone with kindness and empathy, someone you can get behind and cheer for. You understand why people would endear themselves to him because he comes off as reliable and trustworthy, someone who doesn't go back on his word and works his hardest to see things through properly. But also, it makes Shiki much worse, and that's a good thing. Shiki's mental state is so much more contested. He is constantly gripped by madness, and it properly paints him in a different light. In Ark's route in the VN, Shiki is attacked by madness like twice, both of which are the assaults on Ark. In the manga, his mental battle with reality happens much more frequently, and unlike in the VN where there's no magnifying glass on Shiki's worst actions, it makes Shiki try to make sense of the horrific things he's done. Can he absolve himself by blaming his bloodlust on his mental state, or does he have to accept that somewhere, deep down, he was in control and willingly wanted to commit those acts? All of this extremely needed introspection is nowhere to be found in Ark's route, and it feels like the manga is not only greatly expanding on the route by adding in story elements from other routes, but fixes all of the garbage writing in the VN. I had a friend jokingly say to me that you have to be between 14 and 19 to understand Tsukihime's genius, and I think they're really onto something. The only way I could see this touching someone's heart is if they were a shitty edgelord teen. Maybe I'm fucking old now, I'm pushing my mid-30s, but like, I forgot just how bad the edgy-ass 2000s were. Nowadays, I think of edgy as Shadow the Hedgehog with a gun, and I chuckle to myself. But Jesus, it really was this bad. But even then, even if I came to this at age 14, 15, 16, and I was no straight-laced sweet little boy in my teens, I still can't imagine myself liking this shit back then. Even if I had the most charitable read possible, that the translation is so bad that the script is not even remotely faithful to the original Japanese, and in fact actively antagonistic to its initial characters, I can't wrap my head around English speakers reading this and walking away a fan. Clannad boggled my mind, and Tsukihime made it feel like child's play. Tsukihime is not the worst game I played this year. It does not earn the stub toe of 2023. But that's only because I didn't finish it. Even with only 25% of it done, however, I feel very confident that we have a slam dunk winner for stub toe of 2024. When we come back from the intermission, we'll take a look at who injured my foot the most this year with the winner of stub toe of the year 2023. Oh, goodness. Oh, my goodness. Oh, my graciousness. Welcome to the intermission. I'm trying this thing where I light the room in a way that makes it look good instead of putting my head over the fucking garage LED light that blares throughout this entire place because I need one light source and I have one light socket at the moment. House construction's great. I love it. I'd recommend it to anyone. Anyways, we're going to do things a little quick here today because this video is fucking huge. But just a little bit of channel information. I am now the proud owner of a RetroTink 5X, which means that this video will be the last one where you see really crappy, grainy, dark retro footage because I've been capturing in subpar conditions because I've only had subpar equipment. That ends now, which is good because there's a couple videos that I wanted to do that I kind of needed this for because otherwise it'd be like way too much crap footage. So that's nice. Yeah, that's really nice. Anyways, on to the Idolisms for 2023, the Art of the Year contest. Once again, thank you everybody for voting. I appreciate it. I've changed up the awards a little bit this time. I ask you to do 7 votes, so it feels only fair that I give you 7 winners. And we got a number of ties along the way, so we're going to sit down and talk about it. 7th place is a two-way That's a three-way tie, and I wrote 2. Three-way tie between Raiden Vader from fighting game characters and the people they are based on. Thumbnail from the Naotoshi Nishino listening party of Frustration and Longing. Probably one of my favorite pieces this year. I think this is such a clean, elegant piece, and it goes towards probably my favorite video I've ever put out, and probably ever will put out. This is my favorite video. I don't know if I'll ever do anything that tops this. And Himitsu Sentai Metamor V from recreating the Age of Discovery with Sega Saturn II. A fun piece. I see the flaws in it because I didn't get everything out of this that I wanted, but I can definitely see why people would like it. I think there's still a lot there at the end of the day. 6th place is a fucking 5-way tie. Gaitendo Kazuchi Sakuraba from fighting in characters and the people they're based on. Banger, absolutely crazy piece. I love this. The second I finished it, I was like, yeah, that's scoring somewhere. I think this is amazing. Jin Saotomi Kakugo Hagakure from fighting game characters and the people they are based on. Another excellent piece, chaotic, messy. I think just kind of fit the tone of those characters in that chapter. King Tiger Mask from fighting game characters and the people they are based on. This video was just like, every piece of art on this one was an all-timer. There's a reason they all got votes. The Tony Hawk Effect from top 5 favorite video games all time. Number 4, Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2. Number 3, Silent Hill 2. A little bit surprised this showed up because I think it's just overall messy and elegant, but I also think that those could be reasons why someone would like it. So I got that going for me, I guess. And rounding out the last tie in 6th place, Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel from gaming in the 2022 year. Really clean. Like just a really neat piece. I like it. I like it a lot. 5th place, 2-way tie. The answer lies in the heart of battle from Ghost of Super Street Fighter 4 and Bulk Slash from recreating the Age of Discovery with the Sega Saturn II. A little surprised, a little shocked. I'll say the word, I'll say the word. A little shocked that Bulk Slash made it so far. This got a lot of votes early on and was kind of sitting around the top 3 for a long time. I can't say I don't get it because it's a cool piece, but it's flat. It lacks dimensionality in a way that I want to create with. And so it feels very flat in a way that I don't like. But I'm not fucking voting, so who cares? 4th place, 2-way tie. Thumbnail from the fighting game community video canon with Professor Idolism J. I will be in the future not including these like funny haha meme edit art pieces because they're not art. I just throw my goofball ass dorky tiny smile face over something and like kick it out the door. And people like it because it's funny. I get that. That's the whole point. But for the whole art contest reason, it feels maybe a little gauche to add it. And then tied with that is Nikke, Goddess of Victory from gaming in the 2022 year. This piece rules. This piece slams. I loved this. I think once I got to like a little less than halfway through it, I was just like, oh yeah, I know exactly where this is going. This is going to look excellent. And then when I finished it, I was like, damn it, I was right. This is awesome. That's one of my favorites for this year. 3rd place, all by itself, Guilty Gear Xrd Rollback from gaming in the 2022 year. I have no idea why people like this. I think it's messy. I think the color blocking is not exactly adding as much as it's taking away, outside of some very interesting transitional effects that leave that little lighting lines. I don't get it, but people liked it, and I guess that's all I got for you. Thanks. 2nd place is more games in a language I can't fucking read from recreating the Age of Discovery with the Sega Saturn II. And if we're talking about pieces I don't know if I like, this is the big one. I don't doubt that people like this piece because I think it's very attractive. But as an artist, I can't look at this and see what it is. I can only see what it wasn't, because this is like 60% of an idea. Like when I was making this, I was like, okay, I've got this somewhat in the bag so far. How do I finish it? And the answer is I kind of didn't. Like I wanted to add more to this. I felt like there was a lot of awkward negative space and a lot of stuff I didn't like. My typography was not great. I was not proud of that. But I can only see it for my process and my failings, and people who look at it, they're not going to see that. They don't know what the fuck I'm doing. It's like, hey, Every artist should understand that. Unless you're broadcasting your process to everyone, they're not going to know what your faults with something are or your process. So don't sweat the details. Because at the end of the day, I do understand why people would like this. But don't be shocked if another piece like this shows up, because I want to finalize that concept that's still kicking in my brain somewhere. Something like this will show up again because I was close to it. I couldn't get it. I couldn't get whatever was out of my brain or out of this piece to be on paper. And I just kind of kicked it out the door and I felt disappointed. But it's still a really good piece. The votes say so. And number one, to no shock, the thumbnail from the Ghost of Super Street Fighter 4. Fucking incredible. I don't know how I made it. It's completely beyond my skill set to make something this good looking, but somehow I did. And that's funny because we'll go behind the curtain a little bit here. This was the second attempt at a thumbnail. The first thumbnail is actually what turned into the Dark Ages art piece, because I had that done and I was like, I like this a lot. I really like the way this looks. I don't know if I like this as a thumbnail. So I used that for a different piece and I got back to the drawing board and I made this. It did not take long. It just kind of came from somewhere. And I banged it out in like 15 fucking minutes, it feels like. And I just like stepped back. I was like, holy shit, how did I do that? This thing looks amazing. So not surprised that it's the number one. And congratulations to the thumbnail for Ghost of Super Street Fighter 4 for winning the Idolism's Art of the Year 2003 contest. Anyways, I don't have any more news. This video is long as shit, and let's just get back to it. Later. Oh, hell nah. Max with the blicky. Since I replayed the original Dark Cloud last year and was thoroughly bowled over by how much I loved it, I decided to revisit the second one as well. Much like the first, I had played a fair amount of Dark Cloud 2 in the 2000s, but this would be my first time playing it to completion. Better graphics, a condensing of party members, a full-fledged story, voice acting. In 3 years, they were able to add to the Dark Cloud formula and make the superior of the two games. Right? Okay, so let's get this out of the way first. I don't know if I can handle being so contrarian to say that Dark Cloud 2 isn't as good as Dark Cloud 1, but goddamn do I think it's true. There are a lot of 2 steps forwards with 1 step back, and even a couple of 1 step forwards with 2 steps back. This makes for a frustrating sequel because the game is better, but also totally not better, as it doesn't build on the foundation the way you would want it to. Let's start with the big one. The game is slower. Not just slower in like a pacing sense, although you bet your ass it is, but like technically slower. I'm just going out on a limb here, but after reviewing both games' footage and having them fresh in my mind, Dark Cloud 1 feels like it's running closer to 60 FPS and Dark Cloud 2 feels closer to 30. These are just rough estimates, but there is obviously a visual and physical difference between the two. I don't think combat is necessarily affected by the supposed FPS change, but it absolutely feels slower as well. Attack movements feel weighty and sluggish. You can't establish a lock-on while attacking. You also can't remove lock-on when attacking, which is important because movement while in lock-on feels too slow to properly dodge and approach enemies. The same can be said for Monika's magic casting. You only see enemy health when locked on. All of this combines for a combat system that feels so much worse. Dodging in and out of range is harder, circle strafing is harder, or in some cases not even possible against projectiles. It is so much sludgier and worse to play. Dark Cloud 1 had a more simplistic combat, but it moved and flowed better. Dark Cloud 2 has a more robust combat system, but I found myself less effective in fighting because of it. That sounds counterintuitive, you might think, but what Dark Cloud 2 adds isn't exactly a straight upgrade. Having melee and range now available at the same time and not needing to switch to tone for the party balls is a huge increase. But you now have a standard multi-hit attack string, but also a leaping strike, a backflip dodge, and additional attack strings too. The backflip dodge is the best new feature, as it feels like you can cancel immediately into this to dodge an attack. But the leaping strike and other strings feel wonky. They are performed by pressing a direction and the attack button. Kinda. You can get a leaping strike while running, but sometimes I wouldn't get it while holding forward. Sometimes I would get it while trying to readjust my position. Sometimes I would get it because I didn't know what direction forward was in the encounter. I definitely took errant damage on many encounters because I did something I didn't mean to at a range I wasn't expecting, on top of the damage taken by the lack of good movement speed. What the game wants you to do is spend more time defending, but defending doesn't always block all the damage. They also want you to melee projectiles back at opponents, but with how sluggish the attacks are, it's not reliable to time this, and it would just be way better if you could strafe dodge like in the first game. Let's pivot to something Darkcloud 2 does get right: synthesizing. Weapons upgrade the exact same way in 2, but stat upgrades are no longer directly tied to exactly when the weapon levels up. Now anytime you get a level up, that weapon gets synthesis points you can spend whenever you want. The weapon evolutions now have branching paths and lower stat requirements, which is good because in Darkcloud 1 I literally never evolved a weapon. The requirements were too high and I always ended up finding a new, better weapon and synthesizing my current one onto it to boost the shit out of the stats instead. Now the system feels like it works. You can build towards something and likely get there. The problem is that you can't synth weapons onto other weapons anymore. I mean, you can, but if you dust a weapon with good stats, it gives you absolutely fuck all in terms of synth stats back. It's a total waste, and you won't figure that out until you dust that weapon. I understand that they might have wanted to minimize the amount of weapon snowballing that happened in Darkcloud 1, but in doing so, they made it so that if you have another weapon or another path down the weapon chart you want to go down, you have to manually grind that weapon instead. Photography feels like an insanely bloated mechanic that is relevant to the entire game, including numerous photo opportunities you can permanently miss. The invention mechanic it serves is fucking no fun to play with because it's all just random junk with no logical line of thoughts. You get invention ideas by sniffing around in the world. Literally, the introduction to the mechanic is making a robot battery pack out of milk jugs, a belt, and pipes. There is no logic behind the system, so there's no sense in experimenting. It all just feels like a bag of bullshit that only becomes clear when you find the secondary information telling you so. Recruiting adventurers is awful. They are predominantly NPCs that you have no way to know are special from the pack. There is no context to who these characters are, and there's no fanfare when you go on their dumb little quests and collect them. The changes to the Georama system make me want to fucking vomit. Instead of having the party balls contain missing pieces to the world, you instead only have one party stone that gives you a variety of items you can make. Did you hear that? You can make them via fucking crafting. You have to now manage all of the fucking crafting material chaff you get in dungeons, which instead of like cool stuff, and then when you run out while making the shit you need, you have to run back into the train, find one of the adventurers who sells it, and then fucking buy it so you can go back to the building process. And because everything is not bespoke items that fit in specific places, you are doing more guesswork on how to finish towns, both in terms of completion rates, which is tied to story progression, but also these culture points, which is a massive freeform system of making things nicer in a nebulous way. This is a massive, massive downgrade from putting towns back together and figuring out the mythology as it happens. It's stomach churning watching this game butcher what its predecessor was doing so well and instead offer a longer, more convoluted, more complex, and less fun version of it.
Okay, I'm sorry, I have to fucking outcast. Darkcloud 2 is bad. It's really, really bad. It's fucking awful. I'm fucking aghast at how bad this game is right now. So, if you've played Darkcloud 1, you go into dungeons and you collect pieces and you rebuild the town. All the town pieces are self-contained to that dungeon. It makes it perfectly fine and you have a little fun sim time doing so. In Darkcloud 2, everything is way more convoluted and more complex. You have to get plans and then build the town around those plans and around the objectives instead of having bespoke little houses of people you build back into the world. And it's not self-contained to the dungeon. So in the first real dungeon, you have to build back certain parts of the town to advance the plot, to actually advance the plot and get other things. It's not that it's like there's 100% completion of each town, but it's not a certain percentage that you hit to advance the next piece of the plot. It's actually the mini objectives that make up that percentage point that advances the plot itself. And that is a huge fucking problem, because the things that it tells you to do for those mini objectives are fucking inscrutable. There is one of the mini objectives that involves you having to house a person named Adele in that town. You have to make the house for them and then they move in. That part's not a problem. The problem is, who the fuck is Adele? There's no point in the game that tells you who Adele is. Adele is an NPC in the servant quarters above the kitchen in Max's fucking mansion on the far side of Palm Brinks, and none of that information is fucking explained in the slightest in the game. There's nothing to tell you who this NPC is. They just look like a maid. There's no fanfare to the character. You have to do their silly little side quests to get them to come on your journey, and then you can select them as a person that goes into the building. But at no point do you know that person is there. You have to fucking fumble. I mean, if you're not using a guide, you have to fucking fumble around Palm Brinks, the starting town, which has many houses and many locations, to find the one person in the fucking quarters on top of a mansion who is plot critical, because when you put her in the town and you flip to the future, she's a seamstress, and she makes the town have a tailoring outfit area where you buy the metal, which allows Monica, the character, the secondary protagonist of the game, the ability to transform. There's no ceremony about that. It's a fucking requirement to find this one character so that Monica unlocks the story required, plot required, gameplay required ability to transform into monsters. This game is fucking horrendous.
Dark Cloud 2 is one of the worst games I've played. It's beyond comprehension. I was so excited to play this coming off the back of Dark Cloud 1. You can go back and listen to it. That game captured me, and it felt like something truly special with how simple the idea was. It took the pitch and it made a game out of it, and all the extra details were just kind of there for the player to grasp at with their own imagination if they wished. Dark Cloud 2 has lost all the magic. I can totally see why in 2003 this was deemed to be the better game. It looks better, and it has way more content. Those were very real criteria back then. And the sheer amount of extra stuff that 3 years was able to create is staggering. Dark Cloud 2 is packed to the gills with systems and mechanics and levels, and all of it make the game so much worse. The bundle of game and presentation feels like they took what they had with Dark Cloud 1 and tried to make a tentpole JRPG series out of it, but to no avail. Sure, it's bigger, but all of the charm has gone away. There's just nothing going on to grab you. The pace of play is much worse now. The newly included story isn't particularly engaging. The music fails to come even remotely close to how impactful it was in Dark Cloud 1. For fuck's sake, the music in Dark Cloud 1 was so good that I made a video about it, and Lord help me if I remember any of the passable but painfully mediocre tracks in this game. None of the soundtrack has any of that heart or ability to invoke childlike fantasy. I've never experienced something like this in gaming before. I played Dark Cloud 2 a lot at my friend's house back in 2004, and I played it again in college, eventually giving up late into the first level, through no fault of my own, but I always had fond memories of it, and I know I'm not alone. But now, playing it again as a full-grown adult, this game is fucking awful, and it is the recipient of this year's Stubbed Toe Award. It's so bad that I didn't even finish it. I know at some point you unlock the ability to play golf in dungeon levels. Another fucking system, Jesus Christ! And I at least wanted to make it that far. But one day, while trudging through the second dungeon and its boring dual lane double backing structure with its offensively mediocre music and unfun combat, I tapped out. I was already 10 plus hours deep. I gave the game more than a fair enough shake, and as much as I love playing through interesting failures that I don't necessarily enjoy, I had to quit. I only got so much time on this rock, and I have a million better things I could be doing with my time, which is why I booted up Dynasty Warriors 3. While playing Dynasty Warriors 3, a certain phrase continued to ring in my head like a refrain. They don't make games like this anymore. There's a lot of ways you can take that expression, but what's interesting to me is the sheer amount of ways it can apply to Dynasty Warriors 3. Like, your knee reaction is to take that statement in some old head dribble, like, some things were better back in my day type shit. And maybe there's a tiny grain to that, but what I really mean is that they don't make games like this anymore.
Don't put on airs.
Leon. The wind!
Lord Meng-Hu, bad news! We're in trouble!
Tunjian, go straight ahead. Cao Cao, go to the top of the Fan Shui gate. Wan Shu, you attack from the rear.
With Wang Shao as their leader, an answer to the tyranny of Dong Zhuo is formed.
There's such an earnest B-movie attitude to Dynasty Warriors 3 that feels unrepeatable. Like, duh, of course the voice acting is bad, but it's ironically bad. I've been quoting this line since I was a young teenager.
Wan Shu, you attack from the rear.
Like, what beautiful delivery. The voice acting is utterly directionless. Almost every voice line sounds lost to context. It's as if all the lines were recorded with no idea how they would be used or if they were going to be put into conversation. Vocal identities are applied or not applied with reckless abandon. You'll have characters with obvious vocal inflections to heighten a character tone, and they'll be talking to Joe from accounting who is pulled into the booth to cover one of the Ho-Jillion characters. It's striking and effective in a way I can't imagine they were planning on. Lines, through oddity and repetition, become burned into your brain in a manner a more competent voice direction could only hope to achieve. Yeah, it's bad, but that's what makes it good. Pairing with the cheeseball vocal performances is the cheeseball butt rock. It feels perfect, like it's just impossible that any other style of music could have fit this game. The pre-battle menu music with its chunky riffs and high-pitched squeedly-deedlies is like the modern march for a historic battle. The high energy melodies pair so well against the intense pace of mowing down hundreds of fools. This feels directly tied to its time. If some indie group attempted to make their own old school Muso in the vein of Dynasty Warriors 3, I don't think they could match the same tone because they would have to try to be this dingy instead of having the natural dinge that leads them to this style. And let's stop bearing the lead. Dynasty Warriors 3 is still fun to play. It's a simple joy. Sure, the depth of combat skills and mowing people down isn't very complex, but it's a lot more than mindless button mashing. I mean, yes, there is a lot of that, but it's really about mitigating damage. Battles are wars of attrition where you need to survive each wave of human sacrifices sent to fall before your blade. Fall they will, but don't be surprised if they take a piece of you with them. Ending chains with the right attack and placements to minimize the chances of some joker striking you as you recover is a real deal, especially when you are dealing with officers or lack reinforcements. I love the scale of this game. I know the PS2 is being pushed into a wheezing fit to have this many bodies on screen and still maintain a stable frame rate, but the sense of scale the game gives off is still beautiful. It meaningfully changes combat when you are able to take a couple of friendly officers into a fight. One of those enemy majors is a lot less scary when you and two friends volley his twirling body back and forth like a game of Tekken Ball where the gawking masses broke the barricade and swarmed the field. The constant officer banter and ticker tracker letting you know who is doing what is just enough smoke and mirrors to let you feel like you are an active part of something so much larger. Sometimes you feel like the main character as you are complimented for reaching 300 kills. Sometimes you feel like one of many vital gears in the machine working towards victory. Dynasty Warriors 3 still rules. It is both engrossing enough to want to keep playing, but lax enough to be something you unwind with. I could possibly recommend turning the difficulty to easy, not because the game is too hard or anything, but because some maps have harsher time limits, and the sponginess of enemies can make it too difficult to complete in time. You don't want to repeat a half-hour battle, trust me. Otherwise, goddamn, this is great. There's so many little details like the minor RPG stat increases and the upgraded weapons and the items that keep you hooked in playing. The action of combat mixed with the comedy of the presentation all congeal to create something I kept rushing home to play again and again. Okay, so like maybe a decade ago, games criticism and analytics made a real effort to distance themselves from the word fun. Because fun doesn't really describe anything. It's a subjective experience from player to player, and critically holds no weight. I'm going to commit a similar sin that I wish wasn't the case. Lunistice has amazing vibes. Lunistice is a mostly linear 3D platformer, and it does a good job of being one of those, but it's not the reason I want to talk about it. The vibes of Lunistice are amazing. It wears the low poly graphics that evoked a pre-HD era, and the bombastic color palette can only remind me of one thing: Sega's Blue Sky Gaming. I would be gobsmacked if Lunistice isn't built off the back of 90s Sega Blue Sky Gaming. If that term is new to you, may I recommend the Honey Pop half of my top 5 favorite video games number 5 video, where I describe that style and aesthetic. The game is constantly popping. Not a level goes by where your eyes aren't taking in cranked up hues of color that wash a cheery and optimistic outlook over your brain. Even levels like the treetops, where the color palette should be more muted and bathed in earthy natural tones, the sharp explosion of color and excitement does not go away. Lunistice is a visual treat, not just because it has cool, low-poly art style, but because it's almost assaulting your senses, not only with that 90s vibrance of color, but with a soundtrack that is equally as gripping. While maybe featuring a bit more piano than synth, the OST for Lunistice perfectly complements the vibes. From the second you boot up the first level, you are smacked with a sound that leaves no room for misinterpretation. If for some reason the visuals are not able to paint the full picture, then the anthemic synths that give way to comforting piano melodies and ride cymbal rhythms will make sure that the entire canvas is drenched in the paint of excitement. These tracks nudge themselves in different directions, like the pumped up jam from Amusement Park Family. Or the more progressive trance and dramatic feel of Forest Melancholy. All the while, as the game progresses, a leitmotif that is so strong and identifiable in the early tracks begins to fade further and further away. Also, the reason I feel so confident that it is following Sega's Blue Sky Gaming is because this game fucking loves Sonic Adventure. Lunistice plays like its own thing, but when given the chance, it will show off grind rails and loop-de-loops. The first level and its accompanying song feel like a direct call out to Sonic Adventure 1's Emerald Coast. You can almost hear the sea breeze and wave crashes that Emerald Coast would invoke be settled naturally at home during Shrine Home. To call the game 90s is not to dismiss it as nostalgia. Lunistice is its own experience that can stand on its own two legs, but is able to rock the influences it finds important without drowning in shit only 90s kids will remember. Just to touch on gameplay a little more, what helps with all this audio-visual immersion is that the game is mostly a single-lane, flow-state platformer. You are looking to kind of zone out and let your instincts take control, to allow the act of attacking and jumping to feel natural. If there's any friction I find with the game, it comes in how the flow state gets broken up exactly 4 times the level. In each zone, there are 4 letters to collect, and there's an obvious fork in the road anytime you need to collect one. What isn't obvious, however, is which path goes towards the letter and which path continues down the level. In a game that is mostly a smash hit, this was the only sour spot. Stopping my flow state was always a bummer, and trying to sniff around each path to suss out if I was choosing the right one is a temporary distraction that was never to the game's benefit. But as far as complaints go, that's it. Lunistice rocks. It's one of the best games I played this year, easy. If you were raised off Sega Blue Skies like I was, then this game will touch you, and even if you weren't raised like that, I think there is still enough of what Lunistice is selling for you to buy. Lunistice comes with high recommendations. It's a damn good game. I honestly don't remember why this was on my Steam wishlist, but fuck it, I bought it anyways. Even from first blush, you can tell that this maybe isn't a professional release. Like, I'm not trying to draw lines between what is and what isn't an indie release, but more that this is very much someone's first video game. In fact, from what I can tell, I think this is a one-person job. This is also not me trying to shit on the game, but maybe better contextualize it because it doesn't feel right to talk about it without that understanding of where it's coming from. Valkie 64 is said to be a game inspired by action-adventure games on the Nintendo 64, but like, the use of the plural games implies more than just Legend of Zelda. This is so obviously someone's attempt to make their own Ocarina of Time, to the point where there are some actionable ripoffs, like hello, that's literally the 3D Zelda minimap. But in fairness, there are some things Valkie 64 gets right, and some things it gets wrong. For starters, this might be one of the best looking low poly nostalgia games I've seen. It has done an incredible job in being just blocky and compressed texture-y enough to invoke the immediate call of an N64 release, while also being smooth enough to feel modern and not kill the nostalgia. It balances this so well. There are times where the game honestly looks so impressive in how it's able to present itself, swimming in the memories of yesteryear without drowning in its weight. You can tell that this was the primary focus of Valkie 64, how to go about threading the needle of a nostalgic bygone era with today's creative hands. You can also tell this was the primary focus because it's maybe the only thing the game really does. Valkie 64 feels like a tech demo. There is an attempt at, but overall lack of, design to the game. Let me put it this way. When I was like 14, I, like every other bespectacled and socially drowning nerd, picked up a Dungeons & Dragons player handbook. After thumbing through it a number of times, I decided to try and map out a dungeon. I got 2 rooms in when I realized that I didn't know what I was doing other than just placing enemies and items. What would a 3rd room have? Just more enemies? Even at that age, I knew I was attempting something that would require some level of design mentality. Sure as hell didn't know what that word was back then, though. Repetitious experiences without any drive or reason behind them wasn't going to be entertaining, so I scrapped the dungeon. This is exactly what plagues Valkie 64. Making an action-adventure game is fucking hard work, and it's just beyond the scope of what this creator was able to do. The actual mechanics of combat are mostly fine, but the enemy variety and difference in approach is almost non-existent. Doubly so for bosses, which do nothing but cycle attacks and be big. Dungeons are mostly linear treks between combat rooms, usually with some minor variant to them, but still just rooms where you do a combat. There aren't any puzzles or traps or interesting roadblocks or anything. And I think the through line of Legend of Zelda makes this more apparent. Zelda games give you a variety of items and therefore a variety of verbs to use to interact with the world. You can build interesting pieces around the use of one or more of these verbs. But because Valkie 64 has no verb set other than combat and maybe platforming, everything is designed around combat and maybe platforming. This leads to funny end results, like still having the Zelda map you collect in dungeons despite them being mostly quick linear experiences that don't really need a map. Honestly, now that I think about it, the reward economy is kind of stunted because of this too. It's not like you ever earn anything meaningful other than rupees or hearts. There are occasional heart pieces or fetch quest items that give you a heart piece, but it's not like you are refilling arrows or bombs or magic. If you open a chest with a key, the door is probably one room over. It's not like you have any real friction between the two. There are so few times where you feel like there is something to look forward to because the game doesn't have anything stored for you as you complete it. Creating engaging stages, set pieces, encounters, rewards, or objectives is just more than what the creator was able to do. And once again, absolutely no shade is being thrown there. It totally feels like they did what they could with what they had, and that's great. They've finished a game, and that is worth praise. It's just that the game they finished feels like 40% of a truly finalized idea. That said, if the other 60% of the game was present, I would probably love this. It wears its heart and inspiration on its sleeve, it succeeds at what it knows it can do, and its shortcomings are interesting to think about from a design perspective. I will say that I gave up towards the end of this game. The last dungeon is a constant slog of combat encounters with a combat system that is maybe a little too unrefined to handle the amount of workload. Most of the game is a cakewalk, but this is the ugly opposite. Damaged, spongy enemies with nowhere near enough health drops to compensate. And man, I got other shit to do with my life other than ram my head against this wall anymore. Also, holy fuck, the fucking music is awful though. Like, Jesus Christ, I'd rather mute it. There has got to be better offerings from a public sound library or something. I really want to love this game. Psuedoregalia hits some of the highest notes when it's achieving on what it set out to do, but it just can't fully pick up the pieces around it. This 3D platformer by way of Metroidvania has a detailed movement system that, in true form to the genre, unlocks slowly over the course of the game. Each time you find an upgrade that expands your moveset, it feels fucking amazing. The sense of momentum and the flow state that you can find yourself in while traversing in Psuedoregalia is easily among the best. Everything feels just a little faster than normal in the best way possible, creating this beautiful ebb and flow of getting around terrain and obstacles. Perfectly keeping up the rhythm of movement and blowing past all the chaff with speedy abilities will keep you playing this game and wanting to know what your next toy to get is. The game is keen on this and features loads of traversal rooms to get around, really never feeling stale with ideas or repeating itself too much. So many of these systems are designed to a T. Once you start stacking abilities, you feel like this game was made for sickos. Maybe the wall kick is a little wonky, seeing how it's this like faux double jump that can adjust your momentum and is active for a while, during which it will wall kick when it hits something, but once you understand its power, it becomes crazy. The movement system is so absurd that I honestly believe I was able to tackle obstacles that were beyond my ability level through sheer grit of abusing the system. Most games feel like they have these safeguards in place that make sure you don't break the game, and Psuedoregalia has them too on occasion, but not enough of them to stop you from feeling like a superhero. You begin to feel unstoppable because with enough skill and thinking, you believe you can traverse nearly everything. Sadly, the combat does not match the similar highs as the movement. It works, but it feels floaty and lacks any sort of impact when striking enemies. It's not horrendous, but it feels ungraceful in a game that is otherwise defined by the feeling of grace. The more you strike enemies, the more your magic level raises, which allows you to drain it to heal or increase the range on your attacks while at a higher level. The healing aspect of this works perfectly. You feel the trade-off of healing because having your maximum rage is such a boon to combat. This incentivizes healing at proper times and not throwing away a heal on a half hit of damage or something. The downside is that the range increase feels vital. At your default range, you feel really stubby and it leads to occasionally feeling lost in a combat encounter. Both your hit detection and the enemy's hit detection can sometimes just not be there in confusing manners. Furthermore, for bigger lumbering enemies, the animation style kinda works against the game. Tracking their movements and ranges feels harder to parse than it should, especially when they snap to facing a new position instead of fluidly making their movements known. Thankfully, combat isn't the biggest part of the game, but every time you have to engage with it, you can tell it kinda doesn't have the same feeling that movement does. If there is one flaw to Psuedoregalia that feels like a critical whiff, it is the lack of a map. With this being designed in the vein of Metroidvania, there is a lot of backtracking to explore with your new abilities. While the game's low poly art style plays well and gives off a vibe that complements a lot of the game, it hampers traversal. When so many rooms are all given the same flat texturing, it becomes very difficult to map out where a place is within the grander scheme of the area. There's a couple of times where I knew where I wanted to go, but I couldn't remember where the dick that place actually was. This leads to a lot of backtracking just to reacclimate yourself, because zones don't really stick out enough to differentiate themselves from the pack, and there are a lot of rooms in this game. This becomes doubly problematic when you start cracking out with the movement system. There were legitimately times where I got into a shortcut I wasn't supposed to be at, was able to do everything backwards, which the game really wasn't accounting for, and then find myself at some common area, traversing a lot and gaining nothing. It's these moments that feel the most deflating, doing all the tribulations the game puts in front of you and getting something that doesn't really lead you down a new path. You can so easily become frustrated by the open-ended world because there's so little direction towards where you should be going. Thus, you just backtrack the game over again and over again and over again until something new turns up. Psuedoregalia is not a long game, but it might feel like one. It took me less than 5 hours, but if you are not the type of person to crack out on movement tech, and especially if you are not the type of person who can draw a good mental map, it will take longer. That said, if you want to go fast and feel the power of solving traversal however you see fit, this game is absolutely for that type of sicko behavior. Huh, that's all the games I had written down. I still haven't crowned Game of the Year yet. Hold on, was there something I was missing? One second. Honestly, this past year of Xrd has been crazy. I have grown and accomplished so much more as a player since that last video that it's actually insane. I love this game with all my heart. I'll never stop playing it, and it was really close to being the Game of the Year for me. But something even more magical beat it out. Okay, so I didn't get around to making the Final Fantasy IV video in time. You can blame surgery for that, but this is it. This is the game of the year by a country fucking mile. I won't go long because the next episode of Playing Every Final Fantasy Kinda is going to be the first video of 2024, and I will absolutely be going long during that one. Like, fucking trust me, dude. We're going to be here for a minute. But let me at least give you a primer, a taste on how I feel about Final Fantasy IV. I had heard at various points throughout the years that Final Fantasy IV was the first real Final Fantasy game. The game that would take us away from the NES era's trappings and give us the foundation that the rest of the series would be built off of. After all, this was the first Final Fantasy that would have a story, with characters, and drama. Final Fantasy IV lives up to that pitch, but it is so much more than just the first real Final Fantasy. It's the first real JRPG as we know it. Final Fantasy IV is phenomenal. I went in with high expectations and I was still utterly blown away by not only how good it was, but how much better it was than all the games that would come after it. It's not just that Final Fantasy IV laid the foundation, it set the high bar for what could be done in this genre, and not everyone was able to reach that moving forward. I love this fucking game. It is immediately the best Final Fantasy I've played, and after having a bit of time to let it settle, it will almost assuredly land in my top 10 favorite video games ever. Y'all need to grab a seat when this FF4 video drops, because I'm going to talk about this game until I fucking pass out. Final Fantasy IV is the game of the year, and it takes it with a runaway performance. I cannot believe how beautiful this game is. That's my year in gaming, dog. It was a good year, but I think it's marred by one game really falling down for me. The Dark Cloud 2 playthrough was very eye-opening. That's the first time I think I've ever gone back to a game from my youth and had such a strong reaction the opposite way. And I really think it's because I went back to Dark Cloud 1 last year and saw just how amazing that game is, and the superficiality of Dark Cloud 2 was not able to band-aid over that game's problems anymore. It's been a minute since my playthrough attempt, and I feel pretty confident in saying that this game settles in my bottom 5 now. Sheesh, like damn. Next year is probably going to be heavily focused on the Final Fantasy series. I think when I first started it, I was content with those videos being something I would do maybe like once or twice a year, but after I got past the NES trilogy, it became so hard not to just constantly think about dropping everything for playing more of them. Like, almost everything that comes out for the next decade of Final Fantasy's chronology is some of the biggest fucking stone cold shit stomping bangers in gaming, and I want to experience that, and I want to experience that now. I will obviously continue with other programming, but this is just a heads up that you might be seeing the FF stuff start to ramp up on this channel. One of the 2 big games I was looking forward to finally came out. Bomb Rush Cyberpunk dropped this year, and I have not played it. I do hope I get to it early next year, but I'm also not going to be shocked if I end up playing it later on. Just because I'm hyped for something doesn't mean I actually get around to playing it. The other all-star on this series, Spirit Swap, was delayed into 2024, so I get a breather yet again on a game that is coming out. I do really hope I like it, because the anticipation has been going on as long as this channel has been around at this point. I have the next couple videos for the start of the year already planned out, so expect to ring in 2024 with more hot J bangers in your subscription feed. Hope you had a good year. See y'all on the other side.
Oh,